Weddings are supposed to be joyful, champagne toasts, flowing lace, laughter beneath fairy lights. But for me, it marked the beginning of a betrayal so sharp it shattered the foundation of everything I thought I knew. My name is Marissa Hale. I'm 34 years old, the reliable one, the planner, the one who always showed up, quietly holding everything together. My younger sister, Camille, she was the spark in every room, the adored daughter, the dreamer, the girl who never had to ask twice, and our mother, Evelyn, treated her like she could do no wrong. When Camille got engaged to Grant Sterling, I was genuinely thrilled. As her maid of honor, I poured myself into every detail. I gave not just my time and effort, but more than $15,000 of my own money. I booked photographers, secured venues, paid deposits, and ordered customized invitations with gold foil lettering. But it was never about the money. It was about showing up for my sister, about being part of the story we'd written together since childhood. For a while, it felt magical. Camille glowed with love, and I stood behind the scenes, stitching her vision into something real. We spent weekends at bridal expos, took long calls debating color palettes, and even toured the Watermark Inn together, a quiet, charming estate we both fell in love with. I covered the deposit without hesitation. Then Evelyn stepped in. Our mother had always blurred the line between control and care. She cared about appearances, coordinated napkins, ironed tablecloths, and curated perfection. Her presence started subtly. A florist recommendation, a few gentle suggestions. "Isn't the Watermark Inn a bit modest?" she mused once. "Ivory washes Camille out, don't you think?" I let it go. For Camille's sake, for peace. But the changes kept coming, quiet and constant. The venue was switched, the florist I'd secured was replaced, the bridal shower theme was changed without discussion, invitations to fittings and tastings slowly stopped, including me. Our group chat grew quiet, messages turned into single-word replies, then silence. Still, I made excuses. Weddings are stressful. She's busy. It's not personal. Then came the night everything unraveled. We were in the kitchen of our childhood home. Evelyn folded her arms, her voice cold and deliberate. "We've all talked, Marissa. You're not welcome at the wedding." I blinked, thinking I'd misheard. "What?" "You've been difficult, controlling. This day is about Camille, not about your opinions or your bank account." I turned to Camille. "Cam? Is that true?" She didn't answer. She looked away. That silence gutted me. I had helped build this day. I had stood by her since she was 5, crying at airport gates and whispering dreams into bunk bed pillows. I wasn't just being excluded, I was being erased. But what they didn't realize, I've always been the one who reads between the lines. This wasn't just a story about a wedding. It was about gaslighting, control, emotional manipulation dressed as family loyalty. And it was the moment I stopped asking for a seat at a table where I was never truly invited. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, cast as too much for simply showing up, then this story is for you. Because they tried to write me out, but I'm still here. And I know how the real story goes. The road stretched out in front of me like a question I wasn't ready to answer. This wasn't just a trip to some forgotten cabin. It felt like a reckoning. Margaret didn't believe in second chances. Her silence had always said more than her words, and now I understood why. That envelope, that key, that house waiting at the end of the forest road, they weren't about peace. They were about revenge. And somehow, she had chosen me to carry it out. The next morning, I left before sunrise, the November sky still clinging to stars. I drove through mist-covered hills, frost lining the roadside trees like powdered sugar on old bones. The key Margaret gave me rested in the passenger seat. It felt heavier than it should have, like it carried weight beyond metal. My GPS lost signal 20 minutes before I reached Forest Hollow Road. I almost missed the turn. It looked more like a hiking trail than a driveway. The gravel crunched under my tires as the trees closed in. The deeper I drove, the more I felt like I was leaving something behind. Not just civilization, but the version of myself who hadn't yet known this part of Margaret's story. When I saw the cottage, I felt it before I fully saw it. A kind of energy. It wasn't spooky, it was paused, as if it had been waiting. The structure was small, weather-worn but sturdy, its white paint peeled by time and wind. Ivy curled around the porch railing, and the front window glowed faintly from the sunlight breaking through tree branches. I stepped out of the car. My boots sank slightly into soft earth. Leaves crackled. It was the kind of silence that demanded respect. The key turned easily in the lock. The door creaked open to reveal a room frozen in memory. Books lined the shelves. A clock ticked faintly. A blanket was draped across the back of a chair like someone had just stepped away. I inhaled. The air smelled of cedar and something floral. Lavender, maybe. My eyes landed on a note on the table. Claire, open the side cabinet. The cabinet creaked as I pulled it open. Inside were a stack of Margaret's journals and a smaller wooden box. I opened the first journal at random. November 4th, the page read. He came again today, smiled like he hadn't drained my savings, said he'd pay it back. I didn't believe him, but I smiled too. I'm tired of being the bad guy. So I nodded and handed him the check. Each entry was a brick in the wall of her history, a life of quiet suffering, painted in the ink of betrayal. I read until the sun shifted and shadows moved across the floor. By late afternoon, I had lit the small fireplace with the kindling I found. The warmth didn't erase the chill entirely. It just made it easier to sit with. I called the law firm Margaret had written on the back of the envelope, Keller and Fox Legal. I'm Claire Rayburn, I said. I think you're expecting my call. Yes, came the voice on the other end. We've been waiting. Can you come in tomorrow? That night I stayed in the cottage. I couldn't explain why. The thought of going home to Eric, of pretending nothing had changed, felt impossible. I made a bed on the old sofa and fell asleep with Margaret's journal on my chest. In the dream that came, I was walking through a garden I didn't recognize. Margaret was there, younger, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and gloves. She was planting wildflowers. Without turning, she said, "The truth has roots, Claire. Let them grow." I woke up just before dawn. I didn't tell Eric where I was. I didn't owe him that. Not anymore. Sacrifice is noble until it becomes expected, until it's no longer a gift, but an obligation worn like shackles. That's what loyalty had become for me, and I didn't even see it until I was watching from the outside, no longer welcomed inside the world I had helped build. Weeks passed. Camille's wedding machine rolled on without a hitch, at least publicly. I watched from the periphery, still clinging to the hope that maybe, just maybe, this was a misunderstanding, that Camille would realize what she was doing, that the sisterhood we'd built since childhood couldn't be rewritten so easily. She didn't, not in the way I needed. The bachelorette party came next. Megan had planned it, a weekend at a luxury cabin in the Adirondacks. Expensive, curated, and completely devoid of Camille's actual preferences. I knew because we'd always dreamed of a coastal weekend, beach bonfires, seafood dinners, spa mornings, not hiking boots and wine tastings. When I texted Camille gently suggesting a change, I got a cold, clipped response. "It's all planned now. Megan's put in a lot of work." That was the first time I felt the shift from passive exclusion to polite dismissal. I still paid the balance on the villa deposit, still organized the surprise honeymoon itinerary, still sent emails to vendors under Camille's name when she missed deadlines. I told myself this was what love looked like, unseen but unwavering. But inside, a question burned. Why was I the only one trying? One afternoon, I ran into an old professor, Mrs. Kinley, at a cafe near my office. We talked briefly before she smiled warmly and said, "You must be so excited for your sister's big day. She said you've done everything for her." My stomach twisted. Camille had told people I was involved, just enough to make it seem like I was valued, while never actually treating me that way. I began to realize that Camille wasn't ignoring me out of malice. She was coasting through the path Evelyn laid out, choosing peace over honesty. And in doing so, she was allowing me to be pushed out under the guise of civility. That night, I cried in the shower. Not because I wasn't invited to the next dress fitting or the flower design meeting, but because I couldn't remember the last time Camille had asked how I was. I had become the background music to her life, present, familiar, but completely taken for granted. Tyler, my partner, noticed. "You've lost something," he said gently as we ate dinner in silence. "I've lost my sister," I replied. "No," he said firmly. "She's just misplaced right now. But you're the one who needs to stop giving so much of yourself to people who don't look back." He was right, and I hated that he was right. So I stopped. Not everything, but just enough. I didn't remind Camille to confirm the string quartet. I didn't rush to cover the last-minute decor upgrade Evelyn had demanded. I began detaching, not out of spite but out of self-preservation. In doing so, I saw things more clearly. Evelyn wasn't just planning a wedding, she was building a narrative. One where Camille was the beloved bride, Megan the best friend turned savior, and I, the sister who had always been a bit much, was quietly rewritten as overbearing and selfish. But I also saw the cracks. Megan didn't know Camille the way I did. Her bachelorette itinerary was already causing tension. Evelyn was arguing with the caterer I had originally found, now replaced by someone cheaper but less reliable. Camille had started texting late at night, asking about lost contact info, forgotten ideas. She missed me. She just didn't know how to say it. Or maybe she didn't know she was allowed. I remembered one conversation with Camille from when we were kids. She'd broken a vase and blamed it on me. When Mom praised her for being honest about her suspicion, Camille cried in our room. "I didn't mean to lie," she whispered. "I just didn't want her mad at me." Even then, she feared Evelyn more than she trusted me, and nothing had changed. That night, I journaled until sunrise. Pages and pages, not a rant, but a reckoning. I listed what I had done, what I had lost, what I still hoped for, and what I would no longer accept. The life lesson hit hard. Loyalty without boundaries is not love, it's martyrdom, and I had sacrificed enough. From that moment forward, I would love Camille as a sister, but no longer at the expense of myself. It wasn't just the way I was excluded, it was who had replaced me. Megan, all wide smiles and curated charm, had fully assumed my position beside Camille. On social media, she was labeled soul sister and maid of honor vibes. In reality, she was a stand-in, wearing my role like a dress she'd borrowed without asking. The photos were always the same. Megan holding color swatches, Megan laughing with Camille, Megan at brunch with Evelyn. Not once was I tagged, mentioned, or even acknowledged. I had been wiped clean from the narrative, and what stung worse? Camille allowed it, enabled it. The real blow came when I learned about the dress. I was having coffee with Natalie, a co-worker of mine who also happened to be friends with the owner of Belle Fleur Bridal. Rebecca said Camille looked amazing in the lace mermaid gown, Natalie chirped. I blinked. Camille went to Belle Fleur? Natalie nodded. Yesterday. I thought you were there too. Your sister, your mom, and your cousin. Champagne, laughs, the whole 9 yards. I mumbled something about work and excused myself. My hands trembled as I walked to the parking lot. I wasn't just excluded from a fitting, I'd missed the moment we used to dream about. When we were little, Camille and I would wrap ourselves in bedsheets and pretend they were wedding gowns. We'd parade around our bedroom, veils made of curtains and bouquets of hairbrushes. We'd promised, we'd be there for each other when the day finally came. I got home and stared at my phone for hours before calling Camille. She answered on the 4th ring. "Hey, how was the dress shopping?" I asked, keeping my voice light. A pause. "Oh, that?" It wasn't even official. Just an appointment Mom had. Megan was free. We didn't expect to find the one. "You didn't think to invite me?" Another pause. "You've been so busy, and honestly, I didn't want it to be tense." Tense. That word clanged in my chest like a slammed door. So that's what I'd become. Not the sister, not the maid of honor, just a source of tension. "I could have made time," I said softly. "Don't make this a big thing, Marissa." That night, I sat in the dark and scrolled through pictures of the dress. It was beautiful. Lace sleeves, a subtle train, Soft champagne underlay. Perfect for Camille. And I hadn't even known she was looking. Evelyn had orchestrated it, of course. That much was clear. She never liked the idea of anyone else being too close to Camille, and I, with my independence, my career, and my habit of asking questions, was always too close for her comfort. Still, Camille had a choice. And she made it. Megan's ascent didn't stop at dress fittings. She planned the bridal shower. The invitations listed her as the host. I received one. An afterthought, emailed at the last minute. I didn't go. Camille texted later. Sorry you missed the shower. Megan did such a great job. No, we missed you. No, wish you'd been there. Just praise for Megan, her new shadow. Tyler saw me reading the message, my face blank. You can't keep doing this to yourself, he said. They're not even pretending anymore. I know, I whispered. It was then I decided to stop reacting and start observing. Because something didn't add up. Megan's sudden rise, Evelyn's complete control, Camille's passivity. It wasn't just wedding stress, it was manipulation. And I had a front row seat. I made copies of receipts, emails, screenshots, the gift list I created, the honeymoon confirmation. I wasn't preparing for war. I was preparing for clarity. Because if no one else was going to speak the truth, I would. Over the next few days, my resolve solidified. When another email went out with new bridal party roles, I didn't even flinch. Megan was now the official maid of honor. Camille didn't call to explain. I didn't ask. But I did receive one unexpected message, an apology email from the string quartet vendor I had originally booked. Sorry to hear the bride's family changed plans, it read. Your deposit has been refunded. I hadn't canceled anything. I called. Who authorized the cancellation? The woman paused. Your mother. She said you'd stepped down. And just like that, Evelyn was rewriting history. I wasn't going to be erased quietly. That weekend, I met with Olivia and laid it all out. Every dollar, every detail, every sting. She looked at me and said, You know this isn't just about the wedding, right? This is a story Evelyn's been trying to write for years. She's just using tool and cake now. She was right. I went home and printed every receipt. I started compiling the timeline, my own narrative, one with dates, facts, intention, because when the time came, I wouldn't just tell my side, I'd show it. I used to think stories were sacred, that they emerged from truth. But watching my mother tell hers, confident, curated, and catastrophically false, I learned something different. Some people don't tell stories to share the truth. They tell them to erase it. Evelyn had always been a master of image, the kind of woman who smiled with her teeth but calculated with her eyes. For years, she carefully managed how the world saw our family, the graceful mother, the darling younger daughter, the reliable older one who never needed anything. I played my role dutifully, but when I stopped playing along, she didn't just cast me out. She rewrote the script so I looked like the villain. It started subtly. A friend from our church messaged me one morning. Heard you were taking a break from the wedding stuff. Hope everything's okay. Taking a break? I hadn't said that, but someone had. Someone was out there telling my story in my voice and making sure no one asked questions. I confronted Evelyn after dinner at her house, just her and me. Why are you telling people I've stepped back from Camille's wedding? I asked calmly, placing my fork down. She didn't miss a beat. Because you have, haven't you? I was pushed out. I think you're misremembering, she said with a gentle smile. You seemed very overwhelmed. We all thought you needed space. That word again. We. She always used it to blur accountability. I never said that, I replied, and I never agreed to give up anything. You didn't need to. It was clear. She sipped her wine. Besides, Megan has been so helpful, it would have been unfair to her if you just reappeared. There it was. Reappeared. I was already being edited out. I left that night not with rage, but with resolve. Evelyn's real talent wasn't lies, it was crafting believable fiction. She dropped just enough truth to mask her motives, dressed her manipulations in silk, and leaned on others' politeness to keep her throne intact. So I did what any good editor does. I started collecting drafts. Every message Evelyn had sent, every email I was CC'd on but never replied to, every accidental omission. I stored them all. Tyler helped me build a timeline, a narrative, but this time, mine. And the more I pulled threads, the more the fabric frayed. Olivia, always my loyal anchor, connected more dots. She recalled an overheard conversation at the engagement party where Evelyn told another guest I was struggling to let go. She made it sound like you were obsessed, Olivia said, like you couldn't handle not being in control. That narrative showed up again, at the florist, who canceled a consultation I'd scheduled, at the baker, who forwarded an email Evelyn sent thanking them for taking over after I stepped back. Control, difficult, overbearing. It wasn't just a story Evelyn was telling, it was a character she was casting me in. The final straw came when Aunt Helen, bless her courage, called to say, "Your mother's been saying you canceled your honeymoon gift out of spite, that it was always conditional." I was stunned. My heart rate surged. "That's not true," I said. "I know," Helen replied, "but she's telling it to anyone who'll listen." That night, I opened my laptop and created a folder titled The Record. Inside, I began to compile a breakdown of financial contributions, email threads contradicting Evelyn's claims, screenshots of Megan stepping in unsolicited, voicemails from Camille that hinted at her confusion. I wasn't preparing a case for a courtroom, I was preparing it for Camille. Because somewhere in the fog of this storytelling war, I still believed she deserved to know the truth. And not just my side, but the receipts, the paper trail, the emotional ledger. But before I could show her, I needed one last piece, confirmation from the vendors. I called the honeymoon travel agent. "Did someone contact you about the cancellation?" "Yes," she replied. "Your mother. She said there was a family issue and that the bride and groom would be unavailable." My chest tightened. "Did she have access to the account?" "She used your email address." The gravity of that sank in slowly. Evelyn had impersonated me, crossed a legal line. That night, Tyler urged me to call a lawyer. "I'm not suing my mother," I said. "You might not have to," he replied, "but you need someone who can explain what's yours to protect." Instead, I called Camille, straight to voicemail. I texted, "We need to talk, soon, no accusations, just facts." No reply. So I did the next best thing. I printed everything, bound it into a folder, and I hand-delivered it to Camille's apartment, slipping it under her door with a post-it. "I love you. This is the truth. You deserve to read it." I didn't sleep that night. My stomach twisted with fear, not that she'd be angry, but that she wouldn't care. The next morning, at 6:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. "Camille, can you meet me?" The text came early, just as dawn broke through the curtains. "Camille, can you meet me?" It was brief, tentative, but after months of silence, that message felt like a door unlocking. I didn't reply right away. I needed to center myself. I'd spent so long feeling like a castaway in a story I helped write. This was the moment I had both feared and prepared for. We met at a small cafe off Lexington Street, one that used to be our spot. Camille arrived first, fidgeting with the lid of her tea, her eyes shadowed by more than just lack of sleep. She looked up, startled when I slid into the chair across from her. "Hi," she said softly. I nodded. "You read it?" She gave a slow, guilty nod. "All of it. Twice." Silence stretched between us, but it wasn't the angry kind. It was filled with questions she hadn't yet found the courage to ask. "I didn't know," Camille whispered. I thought Mom made it seem like you were difficult, controlling, that you were stepping back to focus on work, that the honeymoon was a manipulation," I finished for her. "It was never conditional. I canceled it because I was disinvited from your life." Her voice cracked. "I'm so sorry. I should have asked more. I should have known something was wrong." "You didn't want to know," I said, my voice gentle. "You let her do your thinking because it was easier." Tears welled in her eyes. "I don't know how to fix this." "You don't fix it," I said. "You face it. and then you choose. We sat for hours. Camille asked questions. I answered. I didn't sugarcoat, but I didn't accuse. I showed her the story as it really was, chapter by chapter, backed by timestamps and receipts. By the time we left the cafe, she was pale and silent. She lied to everyone, she murmured. She made me believe you didn't care, and I let her. She didn't just lie to you, I said. She used you. That night, Camille called an emergency family meeting. Evelyn thought it was another wedding budget talk. What she walked into was an intervention. It was me, Camille, Dad, Aunt Helen, and James, who had quietly been reading everything Camille passed to him. The living room felt colder than usual, the air thick with the weight of confrontation. Evelyn walked in with her usual grace, smiling as if nothing had happened. So, what are we discussing? Camille stood. Her voice trembled. The truth. What truth, darling? Evelyn asked, still smiling. You lied, Camille said. About Marissa, about everything. Evelyn's smile faltered for the first time. I don't know what you've been told. I've seen the emails, the screenshots, the canceled bookings, the forged messages. I saw the travel agent's notes. You impersonated Marissa. The silence that followed was brutal. Dad cleared his throat. Is this true, Evelyn? I did what was necessary, she said, the mask slipping. She was ruining the wedding. She always makes everything about her. She was making sure it happened, James interjected, while you were turning it into a performance. Evelyn's eyes darted to each of us, calculating. You're all against me now? No, I said. We're finally telling the same story. She turned to Camille. I did it for you. Camille didn't flinch. Number you did it for control. That night, Camille sent a new message to every wedding vendor. All decisions going forward must be approved by me and my sister, together. It was a quiet kind of revenge, not petty, not public, but firm and final. The next morning, Evelyn left a single voicemail. You'll regret turning your back on your mother. But she was wrong. For the first time, Camille and I were facing forward. The fallout didn't happen in explosions. It unraveled in quiet, strategic decisions. Camille and I knew that confronting Evelyn in that living room was only the beginning. The real test would be what came after, detangling the web she had spun and reclaiming our voices, and in many ways, our identities. The morning after the intervention, Camille and I sat together at her kitchen table, our laptops open, coffee growing cold. We had a list, vendors to call, charges to trace, and most painfully, the question of who really paid for what. I thought Mom and Dad were covering the venue, Camille said, scrolling through her inbox. They made a partial payment, I said gently, pulling up the spreadsheet I'd maintained in silence for months. I covered the rest, quietly. You were stressed, and I didn't want to burden you. Camille blinked at the total. Why didn't you tell me? Because I believed in the dream, in you, and somewhere in me I still thought she'd do the right thing. It was a painful process. We cross-checked receipts, vendor emails, and bank statements. That's when Camille saw it for herself. Evelyn had used my card details for unauthorized upgrades. Gifts, she claimed, came from her. Fancy linens, signature cocktails, even the string lights for the garden ceremony. I didn't know, Camille whispered, horrified. I never asked her to do any of this. I know. We contacted the credit card company next. I explained the situation, carefully separating charges I approved from those I didn't. The representative was understanding, surprisingly so. They began a fraud review. I didn't push for legal action, but I also didn't protect Evelyn from the consequences. Because this wasn't just about money, it was about boundaries, about identity, about finally putting my name back where it belonged. Later that afternoon, Camille found something that made her go still. She altered the wedding insurance documents, she said. She forged your signature. My stomach turned. Are you sure? She listed herself as the primary contact for everything, even the florist contract you signed. That evening, we brought everything to Dad. For the first time in his life, he didn't try to smooth things over. He didn't make excuses for her. He looked at the proof, line by line, contract by contract, and said quietly, "She's been doing this for years. I just didn't want to see it." "What now?" Camille asked. "We protect ourselves," I said. "Financially, emotionally, legally if we have to." We drafted a new payment plan for the remainder of the wedding. Camille and James would handle their portion. I contributed what I felt good about, not what I was guilted into. Every cent was tracked, every boundary made clear. Then Camille reached out to the vendors again. "This is the final contact list," she wrote. "All invoices must come through me and Marissa jointly, no changes without written consent." It was subtle, firm, and unshakable, and it shifted the power. Evelyn didn't take it well. She arrived unannounced to Camille's apartment 3 days later, her face red, voice trembling with restrained rage. "I raised you," she snapped. "I made this wedding happen, and now you've turned me into the villain?" "No one made you do that," Camille replied evenly. "You chose it when you started lying. You're embarrassing me." "I'm protecting myself." Evelyn turned to me next. "You orchestrated this. You've always wanted to tear this family apart." I stood calm. I just stopped letting you rewrite me." She stormed out. That was the last time she spoke to either of us for weeks. But something unexpected happened after that. A quiet shift. Peace. Without Evelyn interfering, the wedding planning felt different. Camille and I worked side by side, rebuilding the dream. And this time, it wasn't about Pinterest boards or elaborate floral arches. It was about intention. "I want you to walk with me," she said one evening. "Before the ceremony, not just down the aisle, just us, like we used to." I nodded. I'd like that. For the first time in months, I saw Camille as herself again, not the character Evelyn had shaped. And I felt like myself again, too. The untangling wasn't just financial, it was emotional, generational, an inheritance of silence, secrecy, and roles we never auditioned for. But as we rewrote the guest list, the speeches, the song choices, it felt like we were writing a new legacy. Not just for us, but for every daughter who had ever been made to feel like a threat for simply standing tall. The peace that followed Evelyn's silence was unfamiliar, unsettling in its stillness, but also strangely sacred. Camille and I both sensed it wouldn't last. When people like Evelyn lose control, they don't disappear. They regroup, they reframe, they retell the story. And that's exactly what began to happen. It started with whispers. Aunt June called to check in, her voice laced with concern. "Your mother said you've been under a lot of stress lately, Marissa, that you're overextended." Overextended, a softer synonym for unwell, the same word Evelyn had used when I pulled back from planning. I knew the game. She was laying the groundwork, positioning herself as the misunderstood matriarch, while I played the unstable daughter. "I'm doing well, actually," I told June. "Thanks for asking." Next came Olivia, who ran into Evelyn at the market. "She told me you've been isolated lately," Olivia said, brows furrowed, "and that Camille was worried." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so expected. "Isolated," I echoed. "Because I stopped funding her lies?" "She's not letting go easily," Olivia said, "but people are starting to ask questions." And some were answering them. James's sister Lauren texted me one evening. "I don't know what happened, but Camille told me to speak to you if I had doubts. I just want to say, I've never seen her look more grounded. I think she's finally seeing clearly." Lauren had never liked Evelyn. Most of the extended family didn't, if they were honest, but she was exhausting to challenge. Evelyn was relentless, persuasive, and performed empathy with Oscar-worthy flair. She spun worry into suspicion, love into obligation. She wasn't trying to fix anything, she was trying to win. But this time, the script had changed. Because I wasn't just enduring, I was documenting. Camille and I had made a pact, no more secrets. So when Dad quietly passed along a voicemail Evelyn had left for him, "You need to talk to Camille. She's being manipulated. You know how Marissa is." We saved it. Labeled it. "This is psychological warfare," Camille said, both exasperated and heartbroken. "She's trying to isolate us again. Divide us." "But she's underestimating something," I replied. "What?" "Us. Together." That week, Camille and I began reshaping more than just the wedding. We called Aunt Catherine, Evelyn's estranged sister. We told her everything. She wasn't surprised. "She did the same thing to me 30 years ago," Catherine said. "I tried to protect your father. She told him I was jealous, vindictive. I lost my brother for years." The generational echo was deafening. "She thrives on triangulation," Catherine explained. "She isolates one person, vilifies another, and keeps everyone circling her as the victim." It all made sense. Evelyn wasn't building a family. She was maintaining a court, and we had refused to bow. "I'd like to be at the wedding," Catherine added gently, "if you'll have me." "We'd be honored," Camille said. And slowly, new voices replaced the old ones. Support replaced suspicion. Guests who hadn't RSVP'd began calling, not to gossip, but to connect. One message stood out. "I always felt like Evelyn was performing. You, both of you, feel real. I can't wait to see you stand together at that altar." But not everyone was thrilled. Evelyn's final attempt came in the form of a letter. It arrived by courier, thick cream stationery folded with precision. Her handwriting was flawless, like always. Inside was a single paragraph. "I hope one day you'll see how much I sacrificed. Everything I did was for your protection. I've only ever wanted what's best. If you continue down this path, don't expect me to watch in silence. Actions have consequences. No signature, no warmth, just veiled threats hidden in scripted concern." Camille read it, then she folded it neatly, placed it in a box labeled Archive, and said, "She doesn't get to rewrite this anymore." And that was that. The wedding was 3 weeks away. Invitations had been reissued, speeches rewritten, roles restored. But more than that, something had changed in us. This wasn't just about a ceremony. It was about courage, about choosing transparency over tradition, boundaries over blood, truth over image. We were no longer whispering. We were speaking. The illusion was beautiful while it lasted. The elegant mother, the picture-perfect daughters, the carefully framed narrative of harmony and grace. But like all illusions, it shattered under the weight of truth. Camille and I didn't expect everyone to take our side. That wasn't the point. What we wanted, what we needed, was to stop pretending. The truth didn't demand applause. It just needed air. And once we gave it that, everything began to shift. It started at the vendor meetings, the florist, the photographer, even the venue coordinator. Each had heard different versions of our story, spun by Evelyn. But now we walked in together, as sisters, clear, calm, united. "She said you'd stepped down," the florist admitted, "that you were too emotional to continue." I smiled. "Turns out I'm just emotional enough to see clearly." Each meeting became a quiet reclamation. We reinstated original plans, refined details we truly cared about, and removed anything added out of obligation or image management. The wedding, once a battleground, was becoming a celebration again, on our terms. But the cracks in the family drama widened beyond vendors. Dad started speaking more, not loudly but firmly. He sat Camille and me down one night and said, "I should have protected you both. I see that now. Your mother, she's always had a way of shaping the story. And I let her. That ends now." We didn't need him to fix it, just to witness it. And finally, he did. Then came the cousins, first distant, then closer, messaging Camille privately. "We always felt something was off," one wrote. "She made us feel guilty for even asking about you." The network of whispered manipulation that Evelyn had maintained for decades began to crumble. Not because we screamed, but because we told the truth plainly, with consistency. The shift culminated when Grandma Martha, Evelyn's mother, frail but lucid, asked to see me. "She says you turned Camille against the family," she said, eyes sharp. "I turned Camille toward herself," I replied, "toward the truth. That's not betrayal. That's protection." Grandma nodded slowly. Your mother's always needed to be the center of everything, but maybe that's her fear talking. It was the closest thing to an acknowledgement I'd ever received from that side of the family, and it was enough. The week before the wedding, I received a package on my doorstep, no return address. Inside was a journal, mine, one I had lost years ago. The note tucked inside was unsigned, but the handwriting was unmistakable. I kept this. I shouldn't have. But I couldn't throw it away. Maybe I hoped you'd remember what you used to write about us. Before everything changed. It was Evelyn's final gesture, not an apology, not even remorse, but maybe, just maybe, a crack in her armor. I left the journal on my shelf. I didn't need it to remember. I'd written my own truth since then, page by page. The final planning session felt different, lighter, even joyful. Camille and I toasted over coffee instead of champagne, smiling over timelines and playlists. "We almost didn't get here," she said. "We had to tear it down to build it right," I replied. "Do you think she'll come?" "She'll come," I said, "but she won't control it." We had no illusions left, but we had something stronger. Clarity. We didn't call it a confrontation, we called it a dinner. But every place setting held more than cutlery. It held truths too long buried, and the silent question of who would finally stop pretending. Camille and I hosted it at Aunt Catherine's home, neutral ground. The dining room was warm and familiar, heavy with the scent of roast chicken and rosemary. It was the kind of space where big things could be said quietly. Dad arrived early. James helped arrange the extra chairs. Grandma Martha sat near the head of the table, her gaze sharper than usual. Camille and I positioned ourselves side by side, and then Evelyn arrived. She walked in like nothing was wrong, dressed impeccably, lips curved in a poised smile. "This looks lovely," she said, placing her bag by the door. We offered her a seat. She took it, and the silence that followed was heavier than any meal we could serve. Camille began. "Before we eat, there are some things we need to talk about." Evelyn blinked slowly. "Now?" "Yes," I said. "Now." What followed wasn't an ambush. It was an unveiling. Camille went first, her voice calm. "I know what you did with the emails, the vendors, the accounts. I know how you erased Marissa from my wedding, from my life, and I let you, but no more." Dad followed, his voice firmer than I'd heard in years. "You've manipulated this family for decades." I stood by, thinking silence meant peace. It didn't. It meant complicity. Evelyn's smile faded. "I see. This is an attack." "No," Aunt Catherine interjected. "This is a reckoning." I laid the folder on the table, the one with everything, receipts, screenshots, timelines, a truth archive. "I don't need you to explain," I said. "I need you to see it, to sit with it. This is not interpretation. This is evidence." She looked at it. She didn't touch it. "You're twisting things," she said finally. "I was trying to protect the family, the wedding, Camille's peace of mind." "You weren't protecting us," Camille said. "You were protecting control." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "So what now? You cut me out?" "No," I said. "We draw lines, clear ones. You are welcome at the wedding." "As a guest," Camille finished. "Not as a planner, not as a puppet master." Grandma Martha nodded. "You've hurt people, Evelyn. It's time to stop pretending you haven't." It wasn't a dramatic blow-up. No screaming, no chairs thrown. It was worse, for Evelyn at least. It was truth without fear, calm rejection of the roles she had assigned us. She stood, stiffly. "If that's how it's going to be, I don't know if I'll come." "That's your choice," Camille said, "but you won't change ours." And just like that, the illusion crumbled entirely. She left, and we stayed. We served dinner. We passed bread. We cried a little, and we laughed. Because secrets are heavy, but telling them, that's when you start to breathe. The morning sun on the day of Camille's wedding streamed through my curtains like an invitation. Soft, golden, steady. It wasn't loud or demanding, just present, and that was enough. We'd made it. After months of upheaval, silence, revelations, and heartbreak, we had arrived at the day that once seemed impossible. But now, it was not only possible, it was peaceful. Camille and I stood in her hotel suite, surrounded by laughter, the hum of makeup brushes, and the soft clink of champagne flutes. Gone were the staged smiles and strategic seating charts of the past. In their place was something quieter but far more valuable: honesty. "You nervous?" I asked her. Camille looked at herself in the mirror, then at me. "Only about the heels. But about marrying James?" She smiled. That part feels solid." I helped her into her dress, lace with soft, cascading sleeves, the same one I hadn't seen her try on, yet had known would be perfect the second I saw it. She looked radiant, not just because of the gown or the light or the flowers, but because of the peace she had finally claimed. "I should have listened to you sooner," she said softly. "You listened when it mattered," I replied. The ceremony was set at a garden terrace just outside the city. Rows of white chairs, a floral arch, a string quartet that played the same melody I had once planned in secret. Guests filed in slowly. Aunt Catherine, Grandma Martha, our cousins. Even Dad looked lighter, his tie slightly crooked but his eyes clear. Evelyn came. She arrived just before the ceremony began, alone, dressed in a powder blue suit. She didn't approach us, didn't ask for a role, didn't make a scene. She simply took her seat in the second row, hands folded in her lap, watching. There was no apology, but there was restraint, and for today, that was enough. As maid of honor, I walked down the aisle ahead of Camille, bouquet in hand, heart steady. Each step felt like closing the distance between who I had been, silent, anxious, overgiving, and who I was now. Someone who knew her worth. Someone who knew that love without boundaries isn't love. It's servitude. Camille followed me, her arm linked with Dad's. When she reached the altar, she turned and smiled at me, not the kind of smile meant for photographs, but the kind that says, "We did this, together." James beamed as she joined him. The vows were handwritten, tearful, and real. No rehearsed grandiosity, just truth. Promises to see each other, to believe each other, to forgive and to grow. And when it was over, they kissed, the guests stood, and joy rippled like wind through spring blossoms. At the reception, I gave my toast. I spoke of childhood adventures, of pillowcase veils and dreams scribbled in spiral notebooks. I spoke of the way love evolves, and how the people who protect us often come in different forms than we expect. And then I said this: "Camille, being your sister hasn't always been easy, but that's because we've both been finding our way through someone else's story. Today, we begin our own. A story about choice, about honesty, and most of all, about choosing each other not just by blood, but by love. I'm proud to stand here with you, not because of what we've been through, but because of who we became because of it." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Camille hugged me so tightly, I felt our childhood selves squeeze into that moment, the ones who used to whisper secrets after bedtime, the ones who swore, no matter what, they'd be each other's maid of honor. Later, Evelyn approached. She didn't say much, just, "You looked beautiful up there." "Thank you," I replied. "I'm trying," she added. And I believed her, not fully, not blindly, but enough. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. Forgiveness doesn't mean returning to what hurt you. And boundaries? Boundaries are love's scaffolding, the structure that keeps it from collapsing under weight. Camille and I had rebuilt our sisterhood, brick by brick, conversation by conversation, not out of guilt, but out of mutual respect. In the weeks that followed, our Sunday brunches resumed. Our text threads lit back up. We laughed more and cried less. James and Camille went on a honeymoon I helped them plan, smaller than the original but chosen together. Evelyn, surprisingly, began therapy. Dad enrolled in a watercolor class he'd always dreamed about. And I? I took a sabbatical. I traveled. I read. I dated someone who listened more than he spoke, and I stopped apologizing for needing space, for asking questions, for being the kind of woman who no longer erases herself to make others comfortable. Because if there's one life lesson this emotional story etched into me, it's this: we are not obligated to keep living inside someone else's version of us. We get to rewrite. Revenge, I've learned, isn't always fire and fury. Sometimes it's joy, peace, a life reclaimed and lived with full, unapologetic presence. Sometimes revenge is simply refusing to be broken. 6 months after the wedding, I stood on a hiking trail in Vermont, wind tangling my hair, the scent of pine and promise in the air. Tyler knelt on one knee, a ring in his hand and hope in his eyes. "Marissa Hale," he said, "will you marry me?" I laughed and cried and said yes. But I had one condition. "We do this our way," I told him. "Small, intentional, no performance, no family politics." He smiled. "Deal." The proposal wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. It was real. And from it grew the next chapter of my life, one rooted not in resentment, but in clarity. A chapter where my story belonged fully to me. Camille cried when I told her, "I'm so happy for you. And I promise, I'll help, not hover." True to her word, she helped design the invitations and picked the playlist. No one made decisions without consent. Every moment was collaborative, not coerced. And that, in itself, was the most beautiful act of revenge, healthy love after toxic control. Evelyn was invited, but with boundaries. She attended as a guest. No speeches, no planning, no manipulation. She honored the limits we set, at least externally. But I saw the flickers of something more in her. Hesitation, perhaps even growth. I don't pretend that healing is linear. Evelyn still slips into old patterns. But now, we name them. Gently, firmly, and we move forward. Or sometimes we don't. That's okay too. Dad continues his watercolor classes. He mailed me a painting last month, an abstract of a house with no walls. "For your new life," the note read. "No more hiding." Camille and James welcomed their first child in the spring, a daughter named Elise Marissa Sterling. When I held her for the first time, she gripped my pinky like she already knew. "She'll never have to unlearn the love she receives," Camille whispered. "Not like we did." I write more now. Essays, columns, stories like this one. About emotional stories, about family drama and family secrets, about life lessons forged in fire. My writing doesn't chase approval. It seeks resonance. The readers who reach out, many of them strangers, often say the same thing. "You told my story. Thank you." It still amazes me how universal the silence was, how shared the longing to be seen. And it reminds me, storytelling is not just remembering. It's resisting. It's reshaping. Because we don't just heal by letting go, we heal by holding on to what's true. Camille and I talk every Sunday. Sometimes it's about parenting, sometimes it's about books. Sometimes, when the world feels too heavy, we just send each other memes and laugh like the girls we used to be. Evelyn attends therapy regularly. Her therapist called once, just to confirm some context I had mentioned. I wasn't surprised. I was grateful. Some nights I think about the moment Evelyn said, "We all agreed. You're not welcome at the wedding." I don't flinch anymore. I understand it for what it was, her last grasp at power she no longer had. I reclaimed everything she tried to take, my role, my dignity, my truth. And that, truly, is the quietest, deepest revenge of all. Not rage, not retaliation, just joy, peace, a name restored, a vow unspoken but lived. If you've ever found yourself cast as the villain in someone else's story, hear me now. You are not what they call you. You are what you choose next. Choose peace, choose truth, choose joy, because your story matters, and you, yes you, get to write it.